We're going to take just a little bit of flux and drop it, and this is pretty watery flux, you can see, and we're going to just allow it to run down into the center of this so that it soaks the shaft with flux. And flux, as I said earlier, is a high temperature soap. So now we come in with hard solder, and these are little solder chips. And basically I come in and cut the chips because we want just a little bit of solder in there. There's one, there's two, and that makes 4 connections. Let's make 5 connections. 3. And then we'll go ahead and cut those in half, and we'll be set. Okay, each little solder segment, you can see, whoop, that thing popped right out of there. You can see each little solder segment is going to go down into the center of this and touch that shaft. So this is going to take a little finesse to get those to go down there and stay there. Yep, there goes one, and it looks like it's in place. Okay, so then we just grab a second one, do the same thing, and so on. Okay, you can see 1 or 2 little chips of solder in there. All 5 are in place, and so we're ready to go ahead and start heating the thing up and bringing everything up to temperature. It's a slow process. This last part, just getting these chips in place, took about 10 minutes because they keep flopping around and messing around. But now they're there, I don't think they're going to go anywhere. So now we have to heat everything up, including the 2 C-clamps, and that's why they look so bad, because every time they get heated up. And everything else has to be heated up. Otherwise, if I just try to heat up this area here, the C-clamps will continue to pull away the heat from the center. And then I'll never be able to get a weld going. Well, you can see that solder piece just started to move. So everything's really kind of starting to come up to temperature. We're starting to heat this up. You can see that little chip of solder in the 1, 2 on the second bar there. And watch it go down as soon as everything comes up to temperature, and hopefully it'll attach itself to the center bar there. And it's just going to take a minute or so. Should be coming down here pretty soon. Everything's coming up to temperature nicely. We'll see if we can get this thing to float in there. And looks like it's just about ready to happen. There it goes. Zip. No, not quite yet. A little bit more temperature. This is a tough one because you can't really see in there. All you can do is just hope. Hope that the thing is going to take. And we're going to just leave it there and see what happens. Alright, so it's come apart. We've taken the C-clamps off. Now it's time to put it in the acid to let it sit for a while so we can look and see if the solder has taken on all of the tongs. We begin today's part of the project by building a bezel for the stone. And if you can see, I'm just coming in with a pair of needle nose pliers here and just finding a general place to bend the bezel material. Now this bezel material is specially made. It's got a little bit softer metal. I mean, it's still 14 karat gold, but the alloys in it are softer, and so it tends to bend a little bit easier. So if you notice, I just rotated that. Now if I come in with a scribe and mark my next position, I can get a more accurate bend. And you can see that there's my next position right there. Put the pliers right up to it. Make sure I'm perpendicular to the line. And make my bend. Piece comes across. It looks like it's going to fit just nicely. So we'll do the same thing for each section there. The bezel's totally surrounding the piece. I find my connection joint from the beginning to the end and put a little mark there. And then take a pair of shears and go ahead and push the stone out. And cut this thing right where we need to cut it. Hopefully I cut it in the right place. I always kind of keep my fingers crossed because you can never tell. Looks like I got a pretty good job there. So pop the stone out. Now when I cut it, those two edges, those two facing edges, they've got just a little bit of a raw edge to them. I'm not going to be able to show it to you. But they have just a little bit of a raw edge to them, then they're not going to match up that well. So I just take a flat file and just kiss those faces. And what that's going to give me is a nice square edge to weld to. And it looks like I might be a bit short, but sometimes you can play with that. So there's the leading edge ready to weld. And just before I weld, I come in with these pliers, little flat nose pliers, and I grab both sides of the junctions and squeeze. And what that does is just tightens up the connection point. Any riffles in the metal itself, it squares them up, and then I can take and put a piece of solder in there and it'll bring it in much tighter. Add a little bit of flux. Oops, knocked it over, of course. Just a bit of flux. And come in with the chip of solder, and in this case, because we're welding so little, we're going to use a very small chip of solder. Then we come in with the torch, heat everything up, hoping that the flux doesn't boil away and pop the solder off of there, and it didn't. You just heat the thing up until it takes. You can just kind of watch it flow. There it goes. So the bezel's gotten, it looks like it's just a little bit too small on this side. And so it's not that big a deal. We just have to play with it a little bit. I always like to do it without playing. But so if you can see that we've got a bow here and it's a little bit tight right there. So we need to move some of the metal from over here over to here. And that's fairly easily done. If you just grab the metal right there and then bring the pliers up just a little bit and squeeze and rotate the turn over. And the same with this one. Just a little bit of a squeeze and rotate. You can see it's starting to balance out. Now I can see that there's a little bit of a loose edge or an odd edge right there. So in a sense, what we could do is go ahead and bring this back. That looks better. That's still, you know, kind of crumpled. Come in with the flat nose pliers, play with it a little bit, and you get a better feel for it there. Now it looks like this might just be a little bit too close. So this is going to take a bit to get it to work properly. That's pretty close. That is pretty close. So also what we can do is, it's so close right now, I'm going to get it a little more squared up, but it's so close right now that I could just say, oh, that's good, and then later on come in and just trim the stone a little bit so the stone fits a little bit better in the bezel. And that sometimes is an approach that works. You can see that the stone is just a little bit outside of the bezel at this point. Not much, just a little bit. Enough to make it a problem later on if you can't trim the stone. But since we can trim it, I don't see a problem. So the bezel's all nice and trimmed and in place. Then we just cut a small piece of flat metal. This is 24 gauge, so it's fairly thin, but thick enough to hold everything together. And that's going to go in back there. So at this point, we take the stone out and take it over to the welding table, weld it up. Well, one other thing. We've decided that this is going to be our top, so I like to go in and just flatten that edge up just a little bit. Little flat filing once again, just so it makes perfect contact with the gold sheet below it. And you can see we're getting a nice reflection off of that, except for right in this little area here, and that's where it would have been a problem later, or once I welded it, if I had not gone in and flat filed this edge. There we go. Still a little off. And that would have been a big problem, because the solder wouldn't have taken in that little corner there. And then I would have had to fight. I would have to fight it. Okay, there's still just a little bit of a edge right there that's not filed down, but it's close enough that I don't have to go any further. There's the upside down side of the stone. There's the polished side of the stone. We're over at the welding table. The piece is laying there. The bezel is going to go on top of the piece. Get it somewhat centered, and then let's go ahead and put flux in there. Get a good amount of flux to flow into the area, making sure that all the corners have flux on them. Now we're ready for welding. The chips of solder are in their place, and we're just going to put a little heat on this. Get the flux to boil away. Notice how the chips of solder have bounced around a bit, so they need to be repositioned. Alright, a little flame in there. Bring everything up to temperature. Have to do it very carefully and very slowly. This is fairly thin material. Yeah, there it goes. Just melted right off. Keep applying it a little bit further until it gets in a full melt. There we go. Look carefully there, and you can see that about two-thirds of the way up that leading face, the solder didn't take. Now that's okay, except that it's gold, and you can't go back a second time and re-weld it. So what we have to do is we have to put it in the acid and then let the acid eat it away a little bit, and then it'll re-weld very easily. Okay, let's have a look at the pendant. See what we've got here. It sat in the acid overnight, and everything looks like it's pretty well going to be nice and clean, so we can look closely. So we pulled three pieces out of the acid this morning. the two projects that I've been working on, which is both of these are the same project, and this is another project I've been working on for a while, and you can see that it's kind of a cut in half version. We're going to take this one over and put it underneath a loop, which is going to give us a 10 power magnification and allow us to see whether all of the tongs have taken or not. And I'm thinking that two of them didn't, so we may have to go back in and re-weld it. So we're going to come in with a loop, come in real close. We've got a 10 power magnification here, and it looks like number 2 and number 3 didn't quite get welded. So we'll need to go back in and re-weld them.